I am originally from Russia and my native language is Russian, but I do speak English quite okay.
How are you? Fine, thank you.
Oh my god!
And even though usually Russians have a reputation for being pretty bad at English,
Russian people, the best people.
The people is class. How are you, Andrei?
and even though it is true a lot of the time, actually a lot of Russians can speak English pretty well. Especially young Russians like me who grew up on the internet, played a lot of video games in English and watched movies and TV and YouTube. So yes, you can actually talk to a lot of Russians in English. However guys, it seems like all of that is going away because Russia is actually currently going at war with English. Not only is the government decreasing the amount of English studies in classes in Russian schools, but they are also now banning Russian businesses from using English words and even Latin letters in their names and on signs on the streets, in advertisements and so on.
Принципиально важно последовательно избавляться от вульгарных и механических иностранных заимствований, которые не обогащают, а напротив засоряют, коверкуют наш язык. Тем более, если те или иные термины давно имеют аналоги в русском языке. Да и в общественном пространстве следует использовать наш исторический алфавит, исторический алфавит кириллицу, а не кашу из латиницы и других символов.
So yeah, you heard the man himself, Mr. P. He said that using English words in Russia and using the Latin script is an insult to the Russian language that is destroying it, and it's pretty much subverting our Russian traditions. Which is, by the way, really funny to hear from a guy who chose a Latin letter, Z, as the symbol for this special military operation, right? There was also the letter V, also a Latin letter that was used as a symbol, so that was very traditional and based right there. So hey there people, it is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian, and welcome to a brand new video in which we're gonna talk about how Russia wants to stop using English and why the government is doing everything in their power to try to stop Russian people from learning it. So yeah, last year the Russian State Duma, the Russian parliament, has officially passed a law about protecting the Russian language. The law is about to come into power this March, and it pretty much bans everybody from using English or the Latin scripts.
Мы сейчас поговорим о том, что вызывает такие у некоторых спорные чувства, некоторые, наоборот, поддерживают. Больше никаких англицизмов у нас в России. С 1 марта следующего года начнет действовать закон, запрещающий оформлять рекламные вывески с использованием иностранных слов. Их предлагают заменить на аналоги на кириллице. Среди самых частых примеров, о которых как раз эксперты говорят, такие слова, как «закрыто», «открыто», «распродажа», «цены», «все». Забыли про это.
Все слова, на которые Даша бы клюнула.
Часто пишут на английском.
Bro, like, why is Moscow news always so fucking embarrassing to watch?
Организации, которые употребляют иностранные наименования, иностранную какую-то лексику, они будут обязаны ее как минимум дублировать на русском языке, то есть она должна быть на русском языке, плюс есть требования к шрифту, что он должен быть аналогичным, плюс русский язык должен превалировать в визуальном восприятии. Бизнеса коснется, безусловно, в части той, что у тех, у кого такие вывески есть, им придется эти вывески заменить.
Конечно, не все так радикально, есть исключения, они касаются только брендов и товарных знаков, которые защищены отдельным законом. Эксперты подчеркивают, все эти изменения – это не запрет на английский, а попытка, наоборот, вернуть в публичное пространство русский язык. Ну и, кстати, не слабо.
Of course, yes. It's all for the betterment of Russia, of course, but to put it short, these are the new rules. Now every single street sign from any business, from any establishment has to be written specifically in Cyrillic, in the Russian alphabet, and without using English words. A lot of stores in Russia like to just put like sale, for example, to advertise that there's a sale going on. Now this is either going to have to be fully in Russian or has to be doubled right away in Russian. If any brand wants to advertise on the internet, they also have to only use Russian words. And there are actually pretty big fines for those that do not comply. If you're a sole entrepreneur, you're going to have to pay up to 20,000 rubles, small business up to 250,000 rubles, and large businesses can be fined up to 500,000. Also, construction companies in Russia are no longer allowed to name the neighborhoods that they're building with English words in them. And the thing is that you guys gotta understand, in Russia right now, an absolutely insane amount of brands, an insane amount of businesses, some of the biggest businesses in Russia, they actually use English words or Latin letters in their names. For example, Wildberries is a really big Russian online store. They have collection points all over Russia. It's like one of the biggest businesses ever. English Latin name. Serve Coffee, for example, a very big coffee chain in Russia that people love. Fully English Latin name, right? Fixed Price is another one, for example. That is like a store with cheap groceries and so on, cheap appliances. Same thing. Something like Love Republic, for example. That's like a Russian clothing retailer for women. Vkusville literally means Tasteville, like a Russian grocery chain. There's also Ozon, which is like the Russian Amazon, basically. It also uses a Latin name. The same with like names of buildings or entire neighborhoods. I mean, you have Moskva City, for example. Moscow City. It's literally called city in Russian, dudes. It's like that Russian financial district. It is basically everywhere because in Russian, it's kind of considered fashionable and cool, and it gives your brand like a luxury Western allure if you name it with an English word. Well, now it's completely banned. Now, what's quite interesting is that there's an exception for companies that already actually exist. Trademarks that have already been registered with an English name or a Latin name will not have to be changed. So all these huge companies in Russia will not have to change their names, but if you want to open a new company, a new business in Russia now, you cannot use Latin letters or you cannot use English words whatsoever. Now, obviously, a lot of English words are used in Russian today. Meeting, shopping, coworking, I mean, it's endless. And look, a lot of words in general in languages are borrowed from each other, so it's hard to tell which words you can and cannot use now. Well, the Russian government actually has an official list of words it considers foreign words, so you have to consult this new list they came up with to know which words you cannot use for your business, and which degenerate foreign words exactly make you a foreign agent and a traitor to Russia. So yeah, in general, they're just creating more red tape, more bureaucracy for businesses in Russia. A lot of businesses in Russia are already struggling right now, and now they have to deal with this nonsense on top of new taxes and everything and new restrictions. Once again, surely an epic win for Russia. And the thing is, this actually has been happening for a while now. In the last few years, Russia has also passed a law that makes it so that packaging on like groceries and other types of products that are, sold in stores, they also have to be changed from Latin to Cyrillic. A lot of foreign brands with Western names are now just spelled in Cyrillic on Russian packaging. So it's getting ridiculous. And what this all is going to lead to is that Russian people, in general, will just get worse at reading English and Latin, and they also simply know less words. I mean, my parents, for example, right? They do not really speak English at all, but they do know a lot of these random English words, thanks to the fact that so many companies in Russia use English words in their names, in their advertisements, in their slogans, I mean, whatever. English words were everywhere in Russia, and you could actually learn them. But now things are about to change. But there's something that is actually way worse that is definitely going to make Russian people worse at English, because the Russian government has recently decreased the amount of classes and studies of English in Russian schools, and instead added a new class. So according to this law that was just signed by the Russian Ministry of Education, English studies in grades 5 to 7 in Russian schools will be restricted to only 2 hours per week. And also, by the way, the same order introduced a new subject for the pupils that are from the 5th to the 7th grades, and the class is called The Spiritual and Moral Culture of Russia. There's gonna be 17 per week, I guess, in the 5th grades, and 34 hours of that for the 6th and 7th graders. And the main aim of the subject is to tell the school pupils about the life, the achievements, the acts, and the personal qualities of outstanding governmental and social personalities of our history. So long story short, it's gonna be propaganda. You can do that as part of history lessons already. But imagine here they're probably gonna spend a lot of time talking about, the greatness of Russia and so on, and how much we're better than everybody else, instead of learning English, which is incredible, right? And according to other sources, this basically means that now, for these school pupils, the amount of classes will go down from 510 hours to 408 hours of English. So basically, yes, school pupils in Russia are now gonna have less English classes, they're gonna be few far in between, and I think it's just great, right? It's really great and awesome, because definitely, guys, this is something that Russian kids just simply do not need. A few years ago on this channel, I talked about how Russia introduced new patriotic lessons, in which kids are taught about the importance of the special military operation and defeating Nazis in Ukraine and so on, right? Kids are being visited by like the veterans of the Ukraine war, which also tell them about, their great achievements, and why kids should not be afraid to give their life for the motherlands. Yes, that's great stuff. We need more of that instead of English lessons. I mean, the Russian government is saying that this measure was done to optimize the classes and to properly organize the study schedule in Russian schools, because of course you have to make room for the propaganda classes. English though, come on. Who needs that? If you want to learn English, you're probably once again a traitor of Russia that wants to leave the country or something. We do not need to raise those kinds of people in our great country. And look, myself, when I was studying in Russian school, I was studying English. From my experience, when I was in school, I was the only one who actually cared, and I was actually the only one who kind of learned English in my entire class, basically. So to be completely honest, I feel like the level of English classes and studying English in Russian schools have already been kind of subpar. A lot of people in Russia come out of school knowing absolutely zero English, and the next generation of Russia is only going to get worse at speaking English. All of this obviously is pretty much being done to keep the people more obedient, more predictable, to reduce their opportunities and to keep them inside of Russia. I mean, right now if you're a Russian citizen, if you want to go study abroad, to Europe for example, it's becoming more and more impossible because of the start of the war. All the connections between Russian universities and Western universities have been broken. It's getting harder to go into places with a Russian diploma, and right now for a lot of people it's actually even impossible to take a simple English proficiency level exam. If you ever researched this, you might know that if you want to study in English in a foreign country and to prove your proficiency of English, there are two main exams out there in the world that people take. The first is the TOEFL exam, and there's also the IELTS exam that is a bit more popular. Both of these exams are actually currently impossible to take in Russia because of sanctions. So if you're a Russian who wants to get a certificate of your English level, you have to go to another country to pass one of these exams. But it's actually even worse than that, because since the Russian government has considered the British Council essentially an extremist and banned organization in Russia, it is actually kind of almost illegal for Russians right now to take an IELTS exam. The British Council is the one that conducts and has created the IELTS exam, and while it's not officially banned for Russian citizens to take this exam, according to the Russian law, you can actually be fined for taking part in any events organized by a banned organization, which the British Council is, and for also spreading its materials. And here a lawyer says that even simply taking the exam can be a crime. But maybe if you are going to take the exam, simply just do not post anything about it. And also, you need to be careful when you cross the Russian border, and it's better to not have any information in your phone about the fact that you're about to take this IELTS exam. So basically, yes, you cannot even mention it or talk about it to anybody because it's basically now an act of terrorism in Russia to take this English test. And here the lawyer says, it's even worse with the law about financing a banned organization. If you send a banned organization any money, that is immediately considered a felony. So it's a good idea to not pay for this exam from bank cards of people that live or go to Russia. So basically yes, even paying for the exam from your bank card can be considered an act of terrorism if you're a Russian citizen. Because once again, according to the Russian law, by taking this IELTS exam, you are sponsoring a banned extremist organization. Incredible. So overall, basically, I think the message is pretty clear here. The Russian citizens, which the Russian government and Vladimir Putin basically see as peasants, simply do not deserve and should never be able to learn anything, and should simply just be kept stupid and complacent. And all this is a big part of the anti-intellectualism trend that is currently happening in Russia. Kind of like all over the world, you know, in Russia now it's kind of not cool to be educated, because fascism needs stupid people to function. Here, a Russian senator from the region of Chelyabinsk, where I'm from actually, not that long ago said that women in Russia should be given birth to children instead of thinking about getting a higher education. We need to stop creating young people that are getting higher educations, and then that leads to absolutely nothing. They either start working in a different field that they studied or something like that, and then this so-called search of self continues for many years, and at the same time, you are losing out on your fertility and the ability to give birth to children. This is actually an extremely common thing for Russian politicians and like celebrities to say right now. I made an entire whole video about this called Russia Bans Having Children that talks about how Russia has restricted the child-free movements and how in Russia right now it's actually officially banned to say that you do not want to have children. Russia is in a bit of a demographic crisis and they want as much people as possible to give birth to create new future soldiers for Russia basically, right? And the government is not going to incentivize the people to actually do it. They're not going to provide them, you know, good living conditions, but they will tell young women to, you know, instead of thinking about nonsense like getting a higher education, to simply just give birth to children. Because once again, who needs education anyway? What are you, some kind of traitor of Russia that you want an education and be a smartass? Maybe if these young people in Russia start getting degrees, they'll actually be able to think for themselves, and we cannot let that happen. The dumber the average person is, the easier it is to control the entire country, basically. And obviously, learning languages and learning English is a very big part of that. Learning a foreign language greatly influences the way you think, and it also makes you open to other perspectives. And if the Russian people learn the English language, it is going to be terrible. They're going to be able to consume Western culture, Western media, and Western news. And that is, of course, no good, because we cannot let a perfect, you know, traditional-based Russian people be poisoned by those horrible Western values, you know, LGBT propaganda, wokeness, you know, democracy, and so on. All these terrible things. We cannot let our people be swayed and affected by this ridiculousness. And even worse, guys, even worse. If the Russian people learn English, they actually might be able to travel to other countries and speak to people there and get unacceptable, terrible opinions from them right into their ears. Or even worse than that, guys, they could even speak to people on the internet. And they're gonna be able to get a different view and a different perspective on life and how things should work, which is once again simply unacceptable. So, only the Russian language it is. We need to cancel English altogether in schools, guys, because, like I already said, as a true Russian patriot, I think that if you're a Russian that that speaks English or ever even tried to learn English, you definitely have to be a Western traitor that seriously wants to abandon and sell out his country. But yeah, guys, I mean, it's just absolutely fucking embarrassing. It's absolutely ridiculous. What can I even say? We live in a globalized world that is more interconnected than ever, and Russia, instead of giving its children and its, youth more opportunities, more ways to express themselves, they're restricting everything. They're restricting the internet. They're restricting, access to free information, access to different information that does not coincide with the Russian propaganda point of view. They're restricting people from watching things and Googling now even things that the Russian government considers terrible and unacceptable, right? And I personally just think it's really sad because knowing English feels so important in today's world. It opens up so many more possibilities for you as a human being to know English, to be able to talk to anybody. And the Russian children, the Russian youth is being robbed of that right now. They're not going to be able to learn English as well. They already cannot take these tests that, can prove their English proficiency and let them go study abroad, in a foreign university and so on. Because a Russian person, once again, has to be complacent, has to live in Russia, never ever go anywhere, never go outside of Russia, and simply then just die in Russia. Hopefully to the government, hopefully, in some kind of new war that they can mobilize you for. That's basically what's going on, I guess, and it is insanely depressing. Anyways, guys, yeah, I guess that's gonna be pretty much it for today's video, though. I hope you guys did enjoy it. Let me know what you think about Russia's assault on the English language. And yeah, people, thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please make sure to slap the like button on it. And also, if you guys would like to support me additionally, that is financially, then go over to the link down in the description and either become a YouTube member or buy me a coffee. It does help me out quite a lot. And yeah, people, thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.